Hello. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. Some kind of technical problems. My colleague Kamil Siko, who is responsible for developing some AI systems, and also Claudia Tolman, which is now absent, but I hope that she will be connected in the few seconds, who will take some visual notes. Oh, Claudia is here. It's excellent. Claudia is taking visual notes, and after the finishing our panel, will share some visual map of our discussion. So in few words, I will check only if we have our participants online and if everything is okay, because I don't know why we have some kind of the technical difficulties. And I would like to ask, maybe I will take opportunity to ask some question as on the opening. In Europe, we have a tendency to be some kind of techno-skeptical persons, and in the United States, somehow it's more the techno-optimistic approach to the technology and possibilities opened by technology. And I have an impression that also in Asia, Asia societies have a more open and more techno-optimistic approach. And I wonder if this difference in approach to the technology and opportunities opened by technology is responsible for this different reaction to COVID pandemic, and also what it means to the future, if this techno-skepticism could be responsible also for our, how it could impact our reaction in the future. And my second question is connected also with the Industry 4.0, because in your presentation, you introduced this hypothesis that it's a beginning only of some fractures in our actual economic, social, and technological ecosystem. So it's also could be a shift in this evolution of our, for example, industrial systems. And I wonder, what is your opinion about the future of the Industry 4.0 ideology? If it's a truly possibility to acceleration of the progress of the Industry 4.0 revolution, because it could be also possible. It's also possible scenario that after the finishing the first phase of pandemic, the people try to go back to this old habits and also old structure of the industry production. And I have also impression, especially in Poland, where we have a lot of we are trying to introduce the Industry 4.0 in Polish companies, that it's a lot of barriers into the introduction this kind of thinking. So what is your perspective around the Industry 4.0 and smart factories around the world? It will be some level of acceptance for this ideology and faster progress in this area. So this first question. Thank you very much.
So thanks for your question. I think I start from the techno-skepticism versus techno-optimism. I think Europe has always been rightly a bit concerned about the power of technology, also because Europe has never seen the light of any technology company starting from Europe. So to some extent, none of our technology solutions are European companies. Europe is an industrial conglomerate that has a significant amount of research and development with a highly educated workforce, but it's not a technology capital in many ways. And that's also true for finance. We don't see the same amount of capitals floating in the European context as much as you see, from the United States to Israel to China to the Gulf. So I think it's a bit of a culture and a little bit of history that we come from an industrial conglomerate. We don't come from a technology ecosystem. And I think this is healthy if we can work with other countries in which the skepticism of Europe is going to help us create governance of technology, because we need to create systems and framework capable of managing the technology we have. To the question about the Industry 4.0, I think this is the greatest opportunity that Europe has to really thrive from the industrial inheritance to the hybrid infrastructure in which we're using technology to expand the value of the assets. We're creating smart technology on the foundation of the asset, because Europe has one of the best infrastructure in the world. So we have to imagine that we should not consider it as a less of a value. We should simply create the access to how do we create value, not only in the physical world, but also in the digital data sphere. And I think this is where I see the possibility of Europe playing an important role. Germany has probably the most serious 4.0 initiative right now. If Germany succeeds, because it's a large country and it has a lot of political power in the EU, we will see more emulation around the European Union. You'll see more countries eventually following with the trends. And I really hope this is going to happen, because the level of contribution that Europe can make on a global level is still significant. Sometimes Europeans forget that the EU is the largest market in the world and the largest per capita, right? And because we still think in terms of individual country, we don't think about the collective value that the EU represents with the 27 member states. So I'm hoping this will profoundly change the options, because, which is going into somehow the tangent question you asked me about the resistance that we have in adopting. When you have so much history, the inheritance from one generation to the other create a lot of friction. And if you have to dismantle an infrastructure for something entirely digital, it's quite hard. It was possible in Estonia because Estonia did not exist before 1989. It's possible in Switzerland because Switzerland has no natural resources. It's possible in small Scandinavian countries because this country don't compete on size. They compete on being agile and smart. So I'm hoping that we will understand if we don't do that, the country that are entirely digitally native, they start to be digital, they can compete at a much faster pace without having the same cost that we have in running the physical world. So I think it's an opportunity to upgrade systems. And I'm hoping, going back to what I was saying before, the COVID is that opportunity in history that has demonstrated how fragile our systems are, also how resilient they can become, and why change is not bad. It's just a necessity, considering the type of challenge we have in the 21st century. It's very different from the economic modeling we used to have back in the 50s that still are used today, which is to some extent a bit of anachronistic, right? Because we're unfortunately dealing with problems that never existed when those frameworks were originally integrated in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. So thanks for the question. I appreciate that.
So we have a next question also connected with this question before. How to build resilience? How? By redesigning organization, by developing new capabilities, and which one you think are most important capabilities in the this new situation?
I think we have to integrate failure and create capacity from it. And it goes back to a little bit of a question you asked before indirectly. In Europe, the idea of failing has a stigmatization, which is huge. Many people don't want to fail because that will ruin their reputation. In the US, when you fail, it's the condition for you to succeed. You need to fail 9 times for the 10th time to be the lucky one, right? So I think if we destigmatize failure, and if we're creating a culture based on failure as critical for learning, so we build a new capacity, I think we're moving into some form of resilience. Resilience is the fact that shocks build capacity. I always make this example because I tend to enjoy the work on Nassim Taleb on anti-fragility, fooled by randomness, black swans. And it says, when you go to the gym and you lift weights, at first the muscle hurts, but it's because of the pain of the muscle that the muscle over time grows. So thinking that we have to remove pain or shocks or failure is something like unnatural in the natural systems. So why don't we think of society equally running in the same way? I think this is how we gain resilience in a much larger acceptance of failure as a condition for new capacities. And that must be cultural as well.
Thank you much. I would like to ask if my colleague Kamil have some questions to you. Kamil.
Thank you, Piotr. Yeah, of course. So I was when I was hearing and I was looking at the slide, which was showing how different organizations and institutions are gaining this resilience and how COVID actually changed the logic in some cases, leading to the acceleration of those businesses and institutions. I was wondering, because for me, COVID, the strong association with the COVID is the vaccine, of course. And with the vaccine, we have another association with the anti-vaccination movements. And I was just wondering to what extent in this new reality, this new factor, which is a large portion of people are either not believing into the problem, questioning the problem itself, or in turn questioning the solutions.
Yeah.
So how should institutions and companies, businesses react and adapt to that? So to illustrate that with the example, I was imagining that people currently are questioning round earth or vaccines, but in my field, so in AI and new technologies, so far the AI has been transparent to people, so nobody is questioning whether AI is good or not. It's just works in the telephones, in computer games, on teleconferences, replacing our backgrounds and so on. But is it possible, do you think it will become an issue for companies like mine, that at some point people will question that they do not want to be serviced by products, let's say medical imaging product like that is using AI to enhance the possibility to detect some changes in the body, and they do not want to they do not want to accept that because it contains AI. Do you think this is something that should be taken into account and companies should adapt to that? Or maybe what's your thought?
Yeah, thanks for this, Camille. I'll start from, I'll give you an answer that will eventually try to answer the two ideas, right? And, one of the things I guess is really problematic these days is that social media has amplified the voice. So truth and untruth, they have the same value in many ways. But some things don't have more than one truth. They only have one truth. If I say the Holocaust did not exist, that is historically untrue. But if I'm given social media space enough to create an amplification of the voice, I'm creating an equal weight between one side of truth and the other one of truth. So I think we should start the society know that not everything has multiple truth. And I guess the problem is that when you empower into social media people that tends to be a minority to amplify their ideas out there, the value of real or non-real from a social media perspective is exactly the same, because this company are paid by the engagement. So I think we should regulate information in a way that we're creating a form of transparency on truth. That goes back to your second question. I think, can always be a force for good when we operate in on the transparency of how algorithms work. You are in AI, so you know that one of the problems we have is the explainability of AI. How does the machine makes a decision? I think we can do this by understanding, first of all, the processes, but also by being clear that when you're programming AI, some human injection becomes a possible bias. You can mitigate the biases by having more people working to the creation of the algorithms, because historically many data scientists were working in isolation from the business side. Still to this day, some company, they outsource the AI algorithm to company outside. They have no idea what the company does. And the metric of success for a technology company is very different than a metric of success from a business operation. But if you integrate them, I think you're creating a degree of transparency that is necessary. So I think transparency is important, Camille, but also a clear understanding that we cannot simply, because of the individual liberties, give the same voice to every single truth, because in some cases, some truths are no more important than others. And as society, we have to make the determination. That was defined society. Society is determined by the choices we're making, not by the absence of choices. So I understand that my view could be also perceived as political. But I'm an economist by training, so everything I think is a political theory anyway. So thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so next question we have in our Q&A section. Questions from Krzysztof Pietrusewicz, who is very well-renowned specialist in Industry 4.0 in Poland area. Questions about how to handle uncertainty in future logics. What could be the shock magnitude that can destabilize our activity? How to handle big uncertainty in our activity? Can technology help us somehow? Yeah. So the question is about the magnitude of the shock, which could destabilize our life completely.
Great question. So, Christoph, to your question. First, I think we should accept that uncertainty is now part of a normal form of distribution of value, because we have too many variables right now. And so any degree of structure and orderly distribution that used to be possible in the past becomes quite unlikely. So I think volatility and uncertainty are directly connecting with the amount of complexity we have in the world right now. I think we should simply shift to the idea that volatility or uncertainty is just the normal evolution of our society right now. That said, how do you deal with that? Going back to a conversation we were having before, if you're building resilience in the organization, you're not necessarily too worried about what kind of shock are you going to have, but more about how do you respond to shocks. And I think responsiveness, different from what we used to call before preparedness, is probably the key idea right now. How can we really build responsiveness from a cultural perspective? I was in a different session today in Portugal, virtually in Portugal. And I remember sharing with my participants that innovation is a mindset, is not a department. I think it's the same for the question you're asking. You know, we have to think about how do we create an innovation in the resilience of how we think? How do we create in processes that are going to become fast and shorter, so that we're thinking of utilizing uncertainty as a mechanism of building capacity in the organization? That said, Christian, I'll try to be honest. Some shocks will always be of a larger scale than the one that we can actually endure. And in natural systems, life and death are part of the same process somehow. We should accept that if you're not designed for resilience, a greater amount of shock will determine the end of a system, right? And we should understand it. Every single private sector understand that if you have a shock, willingly or not, that defines the nature of the future you have. But in some cases, now with technology company, before with banks, we decided to keep them artificially supported with large investment into mainly bailing them out. We have made them even weaker than before. So I think it's just the acceptance that mortality is a part of the process that should actually be accepted as a natural form of transformation. We are in entropy right now. It's a constant transformation. We no longer have a system that was structured and binary and incremental as before. And if we change the way we think and also how we educate our children, I think we profoundly can have a generation of people that will deal with this in a much better way than how we're currently dealing with it right now. Thanks for your question.
Okay. And we have also questions from Thomas Khmal, which this question I think is somehow connected with the questions before. Mm-hmm. Can we, do you have some intuition about what the future shocks could be after COVID? Is it possible to to see what could be next shock to this international system or our societies or economy. If we have this first signs of the next shock to our world, because for COVID we have the signals, because some people like Bill Gates make some prognostics about the possibility of the big global pandemic. But do you see some signals about the next shocks?
Yeah, thanks for this. And Thomas, great question. I consider COVID-19 as climate change 1.0. It's just the very beginning of a climate instability. Zoonotic diseases are transferred when, out of economic necessity, mankind goes and tries to transgress an environment where it's not supposed to be because of economic pressure, because now hunting or fishing doesn't work anymore. So suddenly we start bringing wildlife to a market because it's a way to create some form of economic diversification. But not relating COVID to climate change, it would be a critical mistake. So the answer to your question, the climate instability will continue to create challenges to our society. I think on top of what in your question, cybersecurity and cybercrime and cyber terrorism, it's a big issue because most of our value is currently created through digital infrastructure and that generates intangibles. So if before people would rob a bank by going in and saying this is a bank robbery, today you don't need to do that anymore. You can hack systems. So I think we have to build capacity in cybersecurity, but that is a capacity that we can get. But I think from a shock perspective, the climate instability and everything related to climate instability, from agriculture, food security, involuntary migration, I think we should really understand, and water. Climate at the very beginning is the chemistry of the way systems work in many ways. And a system that is currently going through a transformation is a system that will be unfriendly to the economic geography that we currently have or to our institutional models. So I don't have the certainty, and I always think that academics are the least qualified to figure out anything. But as an intuition, I think this is what I see possible as a challenge, the climate instability and the unintended consequences that we will have from a climate becoming less and less aligned to the expectation that we have from a human perspective. Thanks for your question.
I think that you think about the climate crisis not as one single event, but as a series of the event in different area, medical,
right.
Economical, I don't know, ecosystem, ecosystem, etc. So the long period of the crisis. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so also questions connected with that. If you can invest in one technology, what technology it could be? What kind of innovation solutions you will take under consideration right now as a possibility, as an opportunity for this period of the chaos and changes?
So one of the things that the COVID has really shown to us is that when you are overly dependent from global supply chains, that can generate problems because you're worried about, will I have enough if I have a time of crisis? And so our supply chain, they became partially decentralized. And the part I think is it can become positive. Where we have risk is in the food supply, because today we don't invest in agriculture anymore. But climate change is impacting the effectiveness of crops. So one technology that I've been noticing with a lot of interest is everything related to the vertical farming, which is a technology used to basically grow food, hydroponic or aquaponic or culture. And we have to use the power technology to help us grow food that is going to be pesticide free, 95% of reduction of water, entirely healthy. And I currently calling you today from Dubai. Already in some supermarket, you can find some aquaponic or hydroponic products, which is a sign that the government is investing because this part of the world is struggling with agriculture to import. If you go to Singapore, a country that is surrounded by giants and doesn't have a lot of resources, about 50% of fruit and vegetables are coming from actually hydroponic or from aquaponic or vertical farming. I think right now, if I would give a really genuine advice, investing in technology that help us think about the future of food is going to be critical for our generation, because more people will come to this world because of the uneven distribution of growth. The West shrinks, Africa continues to grow, Latin America continues to grow, Southeast Asia continues to grow. But food is a critical part, and I think when you are growing food differently, you're also improving not only the environment. Just give you an example and then I'll finish on this. When you're growing cotton in the agricultural world, cotton has no economic value, very little, about 2% of the global production of agriculture, but is responsible for about 25% of CO2 emission in the atmosphere. It's a perfect inefficiency, right? So we can actually grow that in vertical farms. I think this is really where we have possibilities. So that would be the technology that I would invest right now if I had to choose one.
So you think that this it could be the opportunity to change this inefficiency in our agricultural system, which is based on the assumption that everything is free or nearly free, land, water, and sun, etc., climate, etc. So we have to think about the making some investment and using these resources more intensively, but without the extending our impact on the environment too much. So it could be more controlled and more
Equitable.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
last question, because we have nearly the end of our questions and answer session. The last questions maybe could be somehow I will ask this question. Are the investment private equity funds the losers or winners of the pandemic in the post-pandemic era? Do you think that this investment, because everything it's changed very, very suddenly. Yeah. So what do you think about the investment made by the private equity and VC companies before pandemic? And what do you think about that? What will be the worth of the VC companies in the future? And how do you make how to make some judge about the investment of the VC before the pandemic?
Yes, thanks for this question. I think the physical world is where we suffer the most. Imagine any asset-rich industry, from hospitality to real estate to infrastructure. In a world that is becoming less mobile than before, investors don't see much of return on that. Of course, investors that have been investing in technology companies, they find out that no matter how many lockdowns we're going to have, Amazon will never lose value in the market, or Apple. So I think there is a clear winner and loser in terms that those investors that went into the more digital solution, they saw their investment multiply by X numbers. And those that were investing in the real economy, they saw their investment becoming smaller. But that brings me to maybe my final point tonight. That is a problem, because our society cannot be driven by the performance of the stock exchange entirely through technology companies. They are completely decoupled from the reality of life. When you hear somebody saying the stock exchange is the historical high, because you're having the shares of Apple, Microsoft, or Facebook rising, it doesn't make the life of people on the ground any better, because the technology company have decoupled themselves from the real economy. I think we have to understand, how do we create the incentive for the investor to invest in the real economy and use technology to bring portable solutions to small, medium enterprises that can actually grow as well in the economy. So I'm hoping that in the future, responsible investment will be a way to understanding that the value of the stock exchange is only as good as is reflecting the nature of the real economy, not just the nature of the technology companies, which is a nice little oligarchic group. It's a bit of a cartel, but it doesn't represent what happened on everyday life in the life of people. So that's how I would like to finish tonight's conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paweł, Bartosz. Sorry, some problem with the microphone. Paweł, okay.
Yeah, it was a very interesting meeting, and it's a pity that we have to finish. But unfortunately, time is running out. Claudia, can you show us what you drew for us?
Yes, sure. I will do it in a second. No, not sharing the screen, but sharing my iPad. Just 1 second. All right. Here it is. That's what I caught. It's not possible to to grab everything because Mark, actually thank you again for the session. It was really interesting, inspiring. I wish those meetings were earlier, when my mind is way fresher and I can I can listen more carefully maybe, but that was both inspiring and actually uplifting, and maybe I would also add well, kind of scary, because talking about climate crisis and so on is not really a good thing, but it's good to be aware of that. And thank you for everything you brought us. Thank you.
I mean, Claudia, this is great. I mean, honestly, your mind is very well way to be able to do this, and I really appreciate this. And I want to say thank you for all of you to having me here tonight. I agree with you that the time was never enough. I'm sorry for those questions that I wasn't able to answer. The fact that I could not answer many questions is also a sign that there were conversations that were triggering some ideas to you. I am on LinkedIn if you guys want to follow some of my work. That's how Paweł, I think, contacted me in the first place, and they work well. You are now part of my network and my friends, so thank you for bringing me over to Poland tonight. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I wish all of us, you, me, and everybody, the right courage to move on in the next few months as we're trying to deal with a situation we might have never seen before. But it's also an opportunity for us to rewire the systems and to realize that at the end of the day, the experience that we have as life is really very similar this day. And then we have more at risk collectively than what we think. So we should actually protect what we have, because it's important. So thank you for this. I appreciate, and I send you all the best from the middle of the night in Dubai at midnight 05. But it was one of the best ways to finish my day. Thank you for the moderation. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the invite. Thank you to the audience, and thank you, and good night to everybody. And Claudia, if I can have that sketch.
Of course.
Yes,
of course.
of course.
I will find you on LinkedIn and I will send it. But anyway, the guys will send it to everybody.
That's pretty cool. I have to say that's really cool, right? I have to say.
Thank you.
Cool sketch.
I'm happy to hear it.
Claudia, great job as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for agreeing to be our great guest. You raised many interesting issues in your presentation that inspire us to think. This is evident in the question to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
thank you. Nice
thank you to Piotr for great moderating the webinar. Yes. Not first time. Thank you, Claudia and Kamil. This very interesting webinar is the end of the Weinnovators series in this year. Okay. And we start in May as a very spontaneous initiative, and ended up with 30 meetings with the greatest contemporary innovators. And we are not going to finish. Weinnovators.club will also inspire us to act next year. On January 15, we invite you to a meeting with Eric Schurenberg, CEO on Mansueto Ventures, publishers of Fast Company and Incorporated Magazine. Eric is one of the most influential business journalists in the world, so I'm sure that it will be a very interesting meeting. So it's over for today. I would like to wish you a good evening. So see you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks. It was a very great pleasure to participate in this meeting. Thank you very much. And thanks our publicity, our audience, and good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.